Bilia. He is the co-founder of Karmic, one of Reddit's leading agencies. So today we're going to talk about the secret power of Reddit and how we can create organic traffic with Reddit. So at the very end, we're also going to connect it a little bit with how we can use it for LinkedIn. Colin has a pretty extensive resume, so we're really happy to jump into it. And thanks for jumping on, Colin.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. Happy to be here.
Perfect. So, Colin, if you don't mind telling us just a little bit about your background, you have a pretty extensive resume with the companies that you've worked for, being head of growth and managing funds as well. So, if you could give us a little background, just even starting from your schooling all the way back then.
I don't know if you want to go back that far because I'm one of those people that came to marketing a little bit later in life. But I'm a multi-time head of growth in venture-backed startups, particularly on the consumer side, including companies like Remote Year, Bungalow. Also have had pretty extensive experience on the agency side, running Meta and Google ads for tons of venture-backed leading startups on the consumer side, but also in B2B. Um, and last year, I had an experience similar to, I think, a lot of marketers where I just suddenly realized that my Google searches were full of Reddit threads. And that's kind of led me down this path towards figuring out how can I take advantage of this as a marketer, and how can I help my clients take advantage of this new emerging channel as well.
Awesome. So, can we talk a little bit about also? So, was there a particular come to moment for
Mm,
when you wanted to start doing Reddit versus all the other platforms?
mm,
Just because from what we see, I don't think it's like a very known platform for
mhm.
advertising. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And there's a whole conversation to be had about like where Reddit fits into the kind of company you are in your acquisition stack, as well as like the stage of company you are. Um, but for me, it was what seemed to happen was suddenly or slowly at first, Google searches started to rank Reddit threads alongside your traditional, let's say, long form SEO focused content, like write 20 to 2,500 words on topic of your choice and try to rank it on the first page of Google. Suddenly, Reddit threads were kicking to the curb. Um, a lot of really expensive content marketing work that brands have invested heavily in over the preceding years. Um, and didn't really notice at first until suddenly I just realized like I've just typed in 3 Google searches in a row. The top ranking thread for each of them was Reddit threads. And I was sifting through Reddit threads trying to find information on the query that I was looking for. And it just clued in. I was like, oh my God, like this is now a behemoth. Because as a marketer, I'd ignored it for a long time, both because like it was small and it was kind of notoriously difficult to market on for a bunch of reasons we can get into later. And it seemed for a long time like the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze, um, but it's gotten a lot juicier. So essentially, like long story short, after figuring that out, doing a little bit of research, figured out that Reddit had, or I should say, Google had partnered with Reddit to use Reddit content to inform its AI. And as such, Reddit threads started to be ranked a lot higher on Google, presumably because um, the search behavior of people ending up on Reddit threads was satisfying search results better than long form blog content, which is like a whole conversation in itself. And the second kind of piece of this, which was unknown at the time, but it's a lot clearer now, is that LLMs are just not very good at sorting through opinion and bringing strong references to opinion-based topics. It's easy to find facts on the internet. Like Wikipedia is the most referenced site for that. But when it comes to opinion, AI needs to leverage broad opinion from a lot of people who are as unbiased as possible. And what Google has done and all the other LLMs have done is start to reference Reddit data to try to surface the most valuable opinion-based information as well. So Reddit has kind of become this like unavoidable piece in the user journey, both because of its position in Google and its position in new LLMs.
Oh, that's also super interesting because, especially like with the rise of AI and shifting out their like opinion pieces, what is the reason behind the fact that
Mm.
Reddit became much more popular than like a blog that has like
Mm.
50 backlinks or more traffic?
That's the million dollar question. I think those things are still valuable, but essentially, I think what they figured out, what users have figured out for years, but we just didn't have like a viable alternative, is that blogs are bought and paid for by the companies that make them. And everyone has had the experience of reading, a highly ranked blog post that says, "Hey, here's the top 10, I don't know, CRMs for e-commerce companies." And surprise, surprise, the number one is the company on whose blog you are now reading. And I think user trust has just been dropping and dropping on the way that, partially because of the way that Google set up its search algorithm to prioritize certain pieces of content over others. And that's what I think is the biggest culprit. Just basically low quality, informed by like SEO, which was informed by the way that Reddit set up its ecosystem, or sorry, by the way that Google set up its search algorithm to rank content.
And we found this too, and I don't know, I don't want to get into like the LinkedIn crossover too soon, but let's just talk a little bit about the SEO crossover.
Sure.
That a lot of times, even when I'm making a search on Google and I'm like, uh, best Excel sheet for some particular topic,
Mm-hmm.
that I find that many times Google prioritizes a lot of times the exactly if it can give me an accurate response to my question over to the
Mm-hmm.
fact of the sources. Like I search the sources up far after. Is this
Mm-hmm.
something similar that Google is doing with partnering with Reddit?
Yes, and that's essentially the AI overviews part of the conversation. Like I'm talking about Google specifically here, just because that's like at the center of so many B2B companies' strategy. Um, I think what's happening is you don't get AI overviews for every query. I My impression of what's happening is the clearer the AI overview can like craft a narrative of pulling in multiple opinions, the more likely you are to get an AI overview. So that typically happens a little more often, I think, like deeper in the funnel when you're asking like comparison questions, or you're like looking for like specific content on like which one's better for this, which one's better for that. Um, but it's coming for all queries. I fully expect to have AI overviews for basically anything that you're going to be looking for, like by the end of the year. And from what I can tell from Google's release notes and more recent announcements, like that seems to be the case.
And this should have been something that maybe I should have asked a little bit earlier on. But in terms of Reddit, for those of the people who are listening who aren't like too familiar with it, how exactly does the ranking system
Mm.
work in terms of if something is a valuable piece of information?
So the primary lever that we've seen is the amount of mentions and the quality of the mentions. It's not clear how much data Reddit actually shares with Google as far as like response quality. Like, does this come from a well-regarded account, or is it like a spam account? That's not super clear. Um, but in some ways, it doesn't matter, because the way that the threads that will rank in the future, they happen in real time. Like that's the kind of main difference between like your traditional, let's call it like content marketing play from a B2B perspective. Like you have a content calendar, you're planning what you're going to be writing, and you are executing on that. On Reddit, you have to be a lot more responsive to conversations happening in real time, um, because we don't know which threads that are posted today will get enough engagement, have some exit velocity beyond the subreddit where it exists, and get enough viewership and engagement on it for it to be weighted highly by Google search algorithm, and also by the algorithms making the decisions behind which threads are referenced and cited in AI overviews and other AI tools as well. So in general, like from an organic perspective, the goal would be to have presence in all threads that have keywords that are important to you, and to stake a claim inside communities that have high congruence with the product that you're selling, and then seeing how the results play out over your initial 3 to 6 months, and then making adjustments from there. Because ultimately, like we don't know what's going to rank when your comment is going to be actually valuable, and that's usually in the first 12 hours when a thread is posted.
Oh, all the way up to the first 12 hours.
Yes, like the half-life of a thread is like 24 hours typically. But it depends on how well that thread ranks in search, because it might get a lot of a lot of play organically, like in the first 24 hours. It might not, but it might end up ranking for a long tail search term down the line. You just really don't know at the point when it's happening. So you have to make some judgment calls around priority keywords. But it's not that difficult because you can tell pretty early on, like how much content volume is being posted organically around your core keywords, like over the last 30 days, over the last 365 days. So you can have a pretty good idea on like how much work am I going to have to do to make sure that I get keyword coverage across the board.
And with Reddit, does it also work a little bit different versus Google in terms of when you're just like keyword stuffing and just trying to rank as high as you can?
Yes, because Google doesn't, well, I shouldn't say that. Like the Reddit threads that get more comments, like I use the word engagement and comments kind of interchangeably, but comments are more valuable because they add more value to the thread itself. If I'm Google and I'm going to send somebody to a Reddit thread to try to satisfy their search intent, the more comments within that thread generally is going to make me think there's a higher chance that the person's search intent will be satisfied. So then it would be seen as a high quality kind of place to send people for that search term. But you don't always know when that's going to happen. And even if you waited to see when a thread gets a lot of comments, by that time, your comment might be buried at the very bottom. So you kind of have to have a different approach that's very like live and like ready to jump when the time comes, because you don't know when a thread will pop. And sometimes it takes a few hours to do that. And if you're late, your comment will get buried.
So it runs a lot on, like you said, a lot on organic engagement, a lot on like commenting and being very active. Because we work with a lot of B2B people, and there's a few B2B companies that also watch these live streams.
Yes.
If you have any people that are like, I don't know if we're giving this to like a B2B CEO, if they have like enough time to be commenting on Reddit and engaging so much. So is there somebody who you would recommend this strategy to specifically, or do you think that this can be across the board?
So there's a couple points to address there. I think the first point is to kind of pull back a little bit to talk about like what you should and shouldn't be writing on LinkedIn as a brand. There's a lot of like, let's just call it like misguided advice out there around like, like building out bot farms and like just commenting your brand name when you have to. Basically, if they're working at all right now, they will not work very soon, and any investment in those kind of tactics is basically getting shut down by Reddit and like having mass amounts of Reddit content like actively banned and erased in retrospect. So with that in mind, the only way to actually like build a brand organically on Reddit is to, once you've identified like the kind of threads that you want to be present in, the keywords, the communities that are important to you, the first step is just adding comments that add as much unique value as possible. No promoting of your brand. There should be no like, hey, like we do this, like you should use us for this, like recommending yourself. That should not be the goal. And there's a few reasons for that, but the main one is when you're starting with a fresh account, you'll have what Reddit calls karma, which is basically like trust that the platform places in you based on the responses of other people who've engaged with your content on if you are someone worth listening to or not. And if no one thinks you're worth listening to from day one, you'll struggle to achieve any kind of exit velocity, get any kind of comments viewed. You'll have your comments taken down way more often. They'll be filtered by Reddit's filters. They'll be taken down by moderators. So the goal really has to be, how can I add as much value to the people who I know are in my target market on these topics as possible for minimum your first 3 months. Once you have some karma, once you have some authority, then you can start thinking a little bit of like, okay, how do I kind of spend some of this authority, some of this karma to more actively promote my brand? But you won't get away with it if everyone just thinks you're there to spam. Reddit's built on trust. That's part of the reason why Google is using it to send users to, because it knows that the information you get there is more or less trustworthy. or at least more trustworthy than a bought and paid for blog post on someone's website. So to kind of shift it around to like, who is this good for? The important thing I think for B2B to keep in mind is enterprise is basically out, in my opinion. If you have a small addressable market of very few decision makers, if you're considering doing accounts-based marketing or you are doing accounts-based marketing, it's probably not going to be worth the investment because A, there won't be enough conversation volume that's going to be relevant enough for you because your addressable market is so small. So the other side of that is if you have a B2B, either SaaS or service business with like a pretty big addressable market, like typically these are all the way up, I would say, to like agencies, like not like multi-year contract kind of like Salesforce integrations, but like maybe like an ads agency or an SEO agency would be like the top end of this, and the lower end would be like your self-serve kind of SaaS companies. In those cases, a lot of opportunity. A lot of people are looking for business tool advice on Reddit, and typically the conversation volume will be lower. So you'll be able to invest more deeply in the relevant threads that do come up because you'll be able to kind of concentrate your forces a little bit more.
Perfect. And one of the points too that you mentioned even before the call was how to run a brand Reddit audit. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yes. So one of the issues that we've noticed when working with brands is, we originally tried to kind of apply the traditional agency model, like sell retainer, execute retainer, try to increase retainer, and just drive results so that we can like retain clients over time. And what we realized is that doesn't quite work on Reddit in most cases because there is no playbook. The playbook is more opaque. And in our opinion, individual brands will have much wider variance in what their strategy is based on what's happening on the platform in their niche before they even thought about Reddit as a potential opportunity for them. So when we run we call it a strategy sprint. So basically it's a 2-week process that helps us like do deep research to figure out where your particular opportunity is on Reddit, run it by like best practices in order to come up with a strategy and a playbook that will work for you. The research section is all about figuring out, like if there is chatter happening about you on Reddit already, where is it happening? What are people saying? How many people are seeing it? We've kind of been able to Reddit doesn't give stats on viewership on comments, but we've been able to figure out like based on priority and where the thread is and how many, what the thread's trajectory through time has been, we can estimate how many eyeballs have been on that. We align that alongside like, are the people in this subreddit actually like aligned with your brand, likely to be in your ICP, in your target market? And we can develop like pretty strong recommendations on like which keywords do we need to prioritize here, which subreddits do we need to prioritize, and in so doing, and then like which channels, or I shouldn't say, which strategy or like playbooks apply best to your situation. Just very quick example. There are situations in which maybe there's a subreddit that's highly aligned with your target customer, but there's not a ton of content being posted that has your focus, your core keywords in them. So in that case, you would have to take a slightly different approach to organic, where you focus much more tightly on just like building a name in that subreddit, in hopes of like creating more search demand for those keywords. But sometimes you really have to like nudge the market towards your topic, or in other cases, you can just tap into the existing conversation around that topic. It really depends. You need to do the research.
Because like, let's say that you're a company that sells fishing hooks. So what you're saying is kind of like going into the subreddit of, broadly speaking, like fishermen, and kind of creating a subreddit there in order to like funnel in traffic to your company.
Yes, not creating a subreddit. That's a whole separate conversation. Typically, we don't recommend that until like you're pretty bought into Reddit as working for your brand after 3 to 6 months of running an organic program. But using the fishhook example, I'm not actually sure, but I'm sure there is a r slash fishing or r slash fisherman community built for fishermen. In the case that that community exists and you sell fishing hooks, I would say you're going to have like a 99% brand congruence with that topic. So you'll have very little to lose by building a name for yourself in that community. It might also be true that not many people are looking up fishhook information by keyword um, on Reddit or on Google and then Reddit by extension of that. So in that case, I would focus completely on just building a name in that community. But there's other cases in which you have a ton of content being produced that has your core keywords. Maybe the content's spread throughout a bunch of different communities or subreddits. Maybe the subreddits where it is showing up in doesn't have super high relevance or congruence with your target market. In that case, you would want to have like a keyword first approach.
Okay, so just correct me if I'm wrong with this one, but it's basically like kind of like the broader the subreddit is, the more you just generally want to create a name for yourself, just because of keywords.
If you have strong basis to believe that a high portion of the people active in that community might one day buy your product or service.
Okay, perfect.
So the fishhook example would be like near 100%, right? But maybe I sell like fishing related hats or like fishing hat, like bucket hats, for example. You know, some fishermen might wear bucket hats, some other people might wear bucket hats, right? So the congruence there between bucket hats and fishermen might only be like 50%.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of also analyzing competitors, can you speak a little bit to that, and then how you would do that for a client on Reddit?
Yeah. So part of the reason why you want to dig deep on competitors is there's a few reasons, but the core one is to uncover like if they have a Reddit strategy. Um, if they do, well, even if they don't, you want to see like what kind of content is being produced by just organically regular Redditors about that company. And you can usually draw a lot of interesting conclusions from there. It also helps unearth uh, not just Reddit content opportunities, but like product opportunities as well. Like if you can analyze the data on competitor mentions and you realize that there's one core problem with the competitor's product that your product actually solves, that gives you like a really good insight into like how you might want to position yourselves against them on Reddit and on other channels. Um, it's kind of like customer interviews on steroids, right? You don't often get to interview the customers of your competitors, but they leave clues across Reddit. So if you can aggregate those and pull that data into usable formats to inform your own strategy on Reddit and in your product development and marketing program in general, I think there's a lot of value there.
Now this is kind of going on to the organic section, because even like we mentioned, most of our strategy comes from LinkedIn, but I think that there's definitely some value, or a lot of value actually coming in from Reddit. And what we found out too, and tell me if this is also applicable for Reddit, is that once we start to get traction on whichever platform that we're on, even if we were on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn, we start to create this like flywheel of customers seeing our services, seeing our products, and it was a lot easier to get real-time feedback once we've started to create a very specific audience. Do you find that too when you're creating an organic audience on Reddit? First off, like how long does it take to create that audience, and how much dividends does it pay in the long run?
So the size of the audience in the beginning is going to be determined by the size of the subreddits that we prioritize and how many people view content on the subreddits and how many people view content that that mention your focus keywords. But in general, the principle is the same. Like associating your name with certain ideas amongst a certain group of people and trying to create as many touch points as possible. In the LinkedIn example, let's just say that you're talking about like LinkedIn organic marketing every day, and I see that content every day, and then 3 months from now I decide to buy because I realize it's for me. The same principle applies on Reddit. The issue, well, I shouldn't say the issue. as far as like kind of the data that you get back, like people will argue with you on Reddit, which is like, it has its downsides in that you need to kind of moderate a little bit and people will poke holes in what you say. But, the plus side of that is like it will sharpen what you are saying because people are giving you what they really think about your perspective on the market. And they will absolutely call you out if you're saying things that are only self-serving or not actually in alignment with other people's understanding of the truth. So it can be a real like splash of cold water or like extremely potent tool for sharpening your own messaging.
Yeah, and I find the same thing too because at least with LinkedIn, like you can really connect like your face and your brand to the comments, and
Mhm.
I think that with Reddit, it's a little bit more anonymous. So making it more anonymous can
Yes.
make it more brutal and even more spammy.
Yes, so that's definitely true. Although on LinkedIn, anybody can comment on anything, whereas
Mm.
on Reddit, you typically the better your reputation, the more highly your content will be ranked in the priority of the way that people see comments in a thread. So the accountability mechanism, there still is an accountability mechanism. It's just different than on Reddit. Um, and that has its pluses and minuses because like people will take their mask off, like they're not wearing their CEO badge, so they might say something they might not otherwise say, um, which might smart a little bit, but it might be truth, and it might be something that you needed to hear that will help you leverage both channels into the future.
That's fair. Let's say that somebody now wants to, they're totally bought into the idea of Reddit. They see the plus side for their company.
Mhm.
You touched a little bit on how we could start organic, but let's say that they had
Mhm.
organic and then they had like a 5K budget to spend. How would
Mm.
you start off with that approach?
Okay, so let's make sure that we draw these into two different groups. So let's start with organic, and then we haven't really talked about the Reddit ads product, but that's like, there's a whole other conversation to be had there. And there's some unique interplay that you can run between organic and paid that's
Mm-hmm.
not really possible on other platforms. But let's start with organic because the main thing you're spending there is your time. Um, the most important thing on Reddit organic is essentially what you're going to be doing is you're not going to be creating threads yourself. You are going to be identifying identifying content that is relevant to your brand, whether it's because of the community or the keyword, like we mentioned, and you're going to be commenting on those threads from an account associated with your brand. It can either be like your brand name or it can be like your brand name plus your name. It really depends on if you're going to have multiple people in your company engaging in this. Um, that adds a whole other interesting kind of wrinkle to it. But assuming it's like, let's just say, single founder, they're trying to replicate their success as like a LinkedIn thought leader kind of strategy on Reddit. The whole goal is to find the right content and add as much value as you can using your privileged position in the market based on like your deep knowledge of the space to just be as valuable as you can. There's two reasons why we do this. One is because we need to build a reputation for your account, and this takes time by design. The second thing is we want to build goodwill amongst the people that are going to be consuming this. Um, if you mention your brand, you will get called. Um, if you mention your brand, you might actually even have your content just taken down. Like Reddit moderators, famously, most subreddits have rules against spam, and some of the moderators have very loose definitions of what spam is. And a lot of subreddits, it's different for every single one, so you got to do your own research on that. Um, they have automated content filters that pull down content from sometimes posters with below a certain level of karma, posters that have not posted in the subreddit before, posters that have not added comments in the subreddit. So you have to start with the goal of not getting banned, essentially not having content taken down, because that's all wasted time, wasted money if that happens. If you can execute on this for, let's say, between 2 to 3 months, be religious about it, make sure you're covering your keywords, covering your community when you can. Um, that's when you maybe need to start thinking about like, how do we prioritize what we're doing here? Um, we have like an order of operations for how we manage organic posting. The first thing that you do once you have some karma is to go back through every mention that your brand has ever had on Reddit, assuming you have some. Uh, Go and manage those threads. Um, we have some brands that have Reddit threads from like 4 years ago that are critical about them. And since then, the product has totally changed, totally different people, totally different customers, etc. But the thread still ranks on page one of Google when you look up their name. And there's just a bunch of criticism that they didn't address. So you need to go in there, and if the thread still allows comments, sometimes they get locked over time. You need to go in and basically address all the criticism. Uh, do it in a way that's like open-hearted and generous. If you seem like you're just sniping back at people, like people will not love that. And try to boost the comments that are in there that are actually positive about your brand. Thank them. Try to make sure that they know it's appreciated. You want to foster people later adding positive opinions of you in other threads as well. So you got to be magnanimous. You got to be nice. Once you have that covered, you want to go back to any thread that's currently ranking in Google search for your priority keywords. So let's just say there's a Reddit thread for like best fish hooks, like you were mentioning. If the thread still allows comments, you want to make sure that you are there adding as much value as you possibly can. Once you have that done, that's backwards looking content that's already been posted. Then you want to look forward. You want to set alerts for your core keywords. You want to tweak those to make sure that like the amount of alerts coming in is about in alignment with how much content you want to be posting, depending on how much time you want to dedicate. For example, you might start with broad keywords first and realize there's like 100 threads a day that mention it. It might be unmanageable. And then you might want to tune it in with some like longer tail search terms. Try to get into the thread with a super valuable comment as soon as you can. It just increases the amount of people that will see it, which increases your possibility of getting upvotes and additional comments on yours, which will increase your visibility in search and LLMs in the future. And then if you still have time, then you want to dig deep on like answering, leaving comments in threads in your core subreddit or subreddits that are highly aligned with your ICP, even if the thread doesn't have a keyword that you think is associated with your brand. So for the fishhook example, I sell fishhooks. I'm in r/fishing. Let's say there's a conversation about boats. I don't sell boats, but I might have some value to add on that. And I might leave a valuable comment there around how to think about fishing boats too. So that's the organic side. I want to pass it back before I move on to the ad side.
There's a few things that caught my attention even when you were mentioning this. But so the first one was the time frame. So just doing this this strategy for the organic, you say it takes anywhere around 2 to 3 months. And how long per day would you have to be commenting approximately?
It depends on the volume that you're willing to invest, and it depends on the volume of relevant conversations that are happening on Reddit. Again, that's kind of why we reference the strategy sprint, because we need to know those numbers before we start making recommendations. You can just start if you want to, focusing on like, you can just start doing it organically, like without any planning in the beginning. And in some cases, that might be a good way to start if you have more time than money. Things change when like speed is a priority. But in general, like Reddit organic is a cumulative, I don't want to say exponential because that might misrepresent like where the ceiling is. But like if you leave one comment, that's not going to do much. But once you have 10, that's quite a bit more valuable than 10 times one comment. Once you get to 100, like the curve, it gets more and more valuable as you increase your surface area. So you need to make sure that you have enough. I say 2 to 3 months. What actually matters is like how much content are you producing over how many keywords, over how much subreddit. And that kind of helps us determine how well saturated we are within like the relevant conversations happening in your niche.
And with that, the other point that you mentioned 2 points and my mind kind of tapered off from one to the other. But you mentioned too about boosting comments that were that made the company
like
look
positive about your brand.
Yeah, they were positive about the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, even before that, like if you're posting on on Reddit, you also find that there's kind of like a compounding effect that with even if you post like one comment one day and you post another comment the next day,
Mm.
those comments they kind of they add up over time. As in, yeah,
Yes.
you're not going to see like the results from one day to the next, but you're definitely going to see the results of like weeks over weeks.
You might. It really depends. Like you might land a really valuable comment on a thread that takes off, and you might end up with an inbox full of people asking about your services. I've seen that happen. Um, it's not what you should expect, and it's not what you should plan for. Um, yeah, it's definitely a longer game in general. But in the same way that LinkedIn is as well. Like LinkedIn has to decide that what you're saying is worth distributing. The same thing is happening on Reddit. It's just that other people are deciding more so than the algorithm. So you have to write for people, and you have to really think about like, how do I unmarket this? How do I like make this real? How do I take off the veil of sales and focus on like actually just doing something valuable for the people who I'm serving with my brand here?
Mm. And you also mentioned too that if you wanted to advertise also as like as just creating your name, or if you wanted to create your company name as well into
Mm-hmm.
the Reddit or the user title. Correct me if I'm wrong with that one.
Yeah.
Do you see any pros and cons versus having one or the other?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So in general, like if this is being plugged into a broader, let's call it like founder thought leadership program that's running on LinkedIn or somewhere else, I would definitely associate my name with it because there's probably going to be crossover between the people who are occupying the niche on, I don't know, like B2C CRMs on Reddit and people on LinkedIn who will end up getting content about B2B CRMs. So there, you definitely want like there to be like recognition across platforms if you can. Um, but a lot of the clients that we actually work with, they in the beginning like they want to keep their account flexible so that either the marketing team's running it, not the founder. That's one kind of aspect when you want to probably keep it as like just straight up brand account. Um, it really depends on like who's doing the writing and who's adding the value. Because like if it's just like a branded perspective on like what the brand thinks is important, keep it general. If it's like a unique perspective of an individual, you probably want to associate the two.
Do you see any better or worse if it's like if it's a personal
Hmm.
versus a brand? Like, do people associate more with the person versus with the brand?
There can be more engaged. I mean, it really comes down to like what is the quality of their opinions and how relevant does it seem to be to the audience, and that's something that we don't always know in the beginning, and that's more important than if your name is in your bio or not, or your username or not.
The other or the last question before we go into the targeted ads is in terms of
Mm,
nailing down exactly the ICP. Uh,
mm,
there's kind of two questions in this one, but do you find that first a lot of people when they start Reddit that they don't really they don't their ICP is a little bit too broad, and what's also
mm,
the benefits of nailing down specifically your ICP and how specific should you go?
mm. So typically we want to have like a detailed ICP that's agnostic of the way that Reddit organizes the world, because we want to keep ourselves honest when it comes to ranking how well a subreddit does or doesn't align with your target ICP. Um, so in general, we want to, I mean, the kind of traditional persona based things around like demographics and stuff just doesn't really matter on Reddit, mostly because like the profiles don't collect that information. So we don't really know. So there may be, you may be in a situation where you need to like adapt your kind of user persona into something more akin to like jobs to be done framework. So instead of, Sally, the 40 something year old marketing director in a CPG company might become marketer with the problem who has the problem of like sorting their email list appropriately before sending life cycle emails or something like that. And that will help you more adaptively figure out like where is the content that's relevant to these people, what are those people searching, and what content, if there is a subreddit with high congruity with your ICP, like what is popular content in that subreddit, because that might also help you figure out like what do these people want to know. and where does there seem to be gaps in the market that can be answered by you, the thought leader.
And do you find a lot of people that they come to you, they're not sure of the ICP and you need to help them out a little bit with that?
Yes, although I would say that in that case, like, I mean, if a brand is trying to scale any channel and they don't know who they're selling to, I mean, you know, we're both marketers. We know that the thing number one is like figure out who you're selling to, come up with a hypothesis on how to frame your product and build your product to those people, and then go try to sell them. And if one of those things doesn't work, you have to iterate from scratch. So you need to have, at the very least, like a strong hypothesis in the beginning. Or a way of like adapting what you think you know into something a little bit more concrete based on research within the, in our case, within the relevant subreddits and the relevant keywords.
That makes sense. Now, just to jump onto the targeting aspect, because I'm trying to keep it within time, but I have so many questions
Sure.
about Reddit. So now let's jump back to the other section of they're good with the organic, they're good with how much time it's going to take to build this organic, but they're like, okay, now we have, let's actually do a little bit lower. Maybe like, let's say we have 3K. How should we spend this?
So interesting question. So part of this, the way that I think about Reddit in general is like, the main reason to do organic is like for SEO and AEO visibility into the future. It's an investment. You'll see benefits later. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But you can take kind of the same pieces of the puzzle that you're executing on if you're running like a LinkedIn thought leadership program, or if you have like valuable content otherwise, by leveraging the Reddit ads platform. And you can leverage it to put yourself in a position to actually be able to use that same content and publish it as a promoted thread, rather than only being able to comment on other people's threads. So step back, like the Reddit ads product has a lot of like, I think about it as like legacy chagrin amongst marketers that's kind of floating around there. Like a lot of people have tried it in the past. They didn't have great experience. There's a bunch of reasons why I think that's true, including like the ad platform used to really suck. Like it wasn't very usable. Targeting was bad. The volume on the platform was low, and people don't measure it properly. But moving past that, there's basically two things that you can do using Reddit ads, specifically for B2B, that are super important. So thing number one is the most obvious. You can just run direct response ads, like similar to what you would run on Meta or LinkedIn. Image or video carousel, add text, send people to a landing page. You can run them for any subreddit that you care about, with a couple exceptions around sensitive topics, like some healthcare topics you can't explicitly target. And you can also make sure that you run them on keywords. So if you have a high priority keyword like fishing hooks, using your example, you can make sure that your fishing hook sale ad is live on every single thread. At least like if you win the auction, and get the ad to be shown on every thread involved that has the keyword fish hook. So that's like important. You have to make sure that you are measuring properly. Reddit does have a conversion API and Pixel, just like other platforms. But from what we've seen, user behavior is a lot longer. You have to think way beyond like pixel windows. You'll get a lot more view-through conversions than click-through conversions. And you'll get a lot more people self-attributing as coming from Reddit, rather than beyond what the pixel reports. So most of our clients report like 2 to 3x more people saying, hey, I've heard about you on Reddit, when they fill in the form, versus the pixel saying, pixel will say 10 conversions, the survey will say 30. So in general, we run those like typically remarketing audiences on Reddit for sure. Typically run small-ish cold audience ads, just to see like what we can learn and what we can figure out. Most brands won't get a cost per acquisition as good as Meta. LinkedIn's another story though. B2B, it depends on the congruence with the keywords in the subreddit, because you can have a really relevant offer to a really relevant subreddit, and like it can go like gangbusters. So that's what you want to kind of think about for direct response. But what I think is most interesting about Reddit ads is an ad format that they have that they call freeform. But basically you can think about it as a Reddit thread that you control, that gets promoted alongside other Reddit threads. And the value of this is that you can essentially post anything you want and make sure that everyone looking up fishhooks in our fishing is going to see the content that you create. So you can see how this would plug in really well with someone already investing in thought leadership on LinkedIn, because you're already creating content for your core audience on LinkedIn. You could then take that content, modify it for the platform, and then just distribute it to a similar group of people on Reddit. But there's this piece that I haven't seen on any other marketing platform that has me so excited. If you can make promoted thread content that actually gets people to comment on it, what you see is your cost per view. It's cost per click technically, but cost per person reading your content. You can drop that by 10x over the course of like a week if you start to get comments. In the same way that if you run an ad on Facebook that gets like a few comments, you usually don't want to mess with that ad because the social proof improves your conversion rate, right? That same principle on Reddit is much more powerful because the main reason why people click threads is to see other people's opinions. So if you can elicit other people's opinions, like say something either valuable enough, divisive enough, interesting enough, or like emotionally triggering enough to have other people comment on your ad, because people will know it's an ad, you can drop your cost per distribution down to pennies on the dollar. And you can really start to control the conversation around your topic in a way that puts you at top of mind. And typically you can measure this. We have a lot of clients where we launch these and suddenly you see their branded search on Google just start to climb and climb. As people start to see your name associated with these ideas, your cost is next to zero. And then people start looking you up because they just know that you're associated with fishhooks.
Wow. I've never heard of that strategy before, as in like that it can decrease your spend, that you can be spending like pennies on. Is this certain ads or certain campaigns?
So it's particularly those are free form ads, but the big like asterisk here is like the content has to be built in a way that you are contributing to the global conversation on this topic. If you just say, hey, we're this company and this is why we're so great, like you won't get a lot of engagement. But if you are starting a conversation around like, hey, we think there's something wrong with excuse me, the fishhook market. Here's our perspective. Here's why we think. What do you think? And then if people start to comment, like what you can do, as a brand, you can also comment on every comment, which has the knock-on effect of doubling your comment count, which increases your click-through rate, but also make sure that people read your thread. They read comments that have you commenting on everything, and your name is just being pounded into their head every time they read about the topic that you want to be associated with.
And with comments like these, or with ads like these, are people a lot more less sensitive to having these types of ads seen on their Reddit, or is it kind of like just the same as if they were to see a Facebook or a LinkedIn ad as well?
Yes, because the best way to do them is to disguise them as not ads. Like the thing with Reddit is like the more you try to sell, the more it pushes people away. Like that's just kind of universally the case. You might still be able to get a good CAC on your direct response ads, but in general, what you want to do is like come in the side. Like the pitch is actually when someone looks you up after they figure out that you're associated with this idea. The way the goal is to make them trust you rather than make them click on your landing page. And the way to make them trust you is to publish valuable content or be the center of pulling valuable content out of other people on the platform. So for example, you could post a big thought leadership post on like, this is what we think about the fishhook industry, to use your example. Or you could post one that says, hey, we want to know what's the best fishhook you've ever used. Like, did it have XYZ characteristic? Tell us what you think. And all of a sudden your brand is now associated with everyone else telling every other reader what their best experience is. So instead of being the content creator, you become the content curator. And the effect is the same. Your brand name is at the middle of value being produced. That value can be propagated over time. You could run the same ad for years. The more comments you get, the higher your click-through rate goes. Your ad costs go down over time rather than up.
Yeah. And in terms of what our ad particularly works, because you also said that there's this one that's great because the cost goes down, but at the same time, if you have like a video or if you have a carousel, if you have an image ad. Is there one strategy that you would recommend over the other, or again, does this all depend on what you're trying to sell?
It does depend. Typically, like the lower your LTV, the more you want to lean into direct response ads because you can't afford to have a longer funnel. But I mean, in most B2B companies' case, I shouldn't say most. Like as long as you have an offering that's beyond like $50 a month self-serve SaaS, like once you start to get towards high friction, high consideration kind of services, and what actually matters is people trusting you, right? Whereas like if you're selling $100 widget, like people don't care, like they'll buy it from whoever they think has the best price. So for B2B, highly recommend going hard on the content angle and just using direct response to remarket to site visitors from other platforms, but also anyone that's engaged in your promoted threads. Because you want to craft the content on those threads to pull in only people who might be a potential customer, right? So basically what you're doing is you are vetting for, let's say 10 cents that someone is interested in the best fishhook kind of content, right? And then those people who opted into reading that content are now seeing your direct response remarketing ads.
And one of the other questions that I wanted to go to, just because I wanted to keep it within the time frame, but you also mentioned with the self-reported attributions as well. Is this a strategy that you also tie in with your Reddit ads, or is this kind of something else that you just recommend people to have because of tracking?
Yes, because like the overarching, I guess, concept of that you need to be invested in before investing in Reddit in any case is that the world is moving away from click based marketing towards no click marketing. This is evidenced by like basically AI overviews and LLMs in general are a move in this direction. Uh, Anyone who's running an SEO program right now knows that like your impressions are remaining the same and your clicks are dropping because basically people are being presented information in AI overviews. Your links are being pushed deeper and deeper into the search page. So you kind of have to reorient how you track your marketing because you're not going to have a click to landing page to purchase. You have the UTM parameter, you have like, your data from the purchase, your pixel tracked it. It's just not happening that way. It's happening less on every channel. It does not happen that way on Reddit. It happens less, I should say, on Reddit. So you absolutely need to have I refer to as qualitative attribution. You need to be asking your users where they heard about you. Full stop. Like you will not know to what degree your Reddit program is successful if you don't have this in any case. So that's like a deal breaker if you don't have that in place. Whether you're running both for paid and for organic. But for paid, if you're running a promoted thread program, the leading indicator is watching your branded search. So the way that we do this with clients is we slowly ramp spend up in chunks. So let's just say you start spending $100 a day. You don't bump up to 120. You wait a couple weeks, a month, then you bump up to 200. And then you go to your Google Search Console and you watch how your branded search traffic has changed and your branded search impressions have changed. That will basically tell you like how many new people are looking you up by name because of what you're doing on Reddit. And a lot of our clients have immediate and strongly felt changes in their branded search when they run promoted threads for the reasons that I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with Chris Walker on LinkedIn?
No, I don't think so.
Because I follow him, and one of the things that he like mentioned too, and that really stuck out with me was that, yeah, basically if something converts, like let's say that a Google ad converts, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that that is what made the conversion. It's a lot of like smaller touch points that actually created that conversion. So if you have the self-reported attribution, you can just see that they can just tell you, it's like, yeah, I heard about you a lot through Reddit, and I got a targeted ad from you, and then I converted through Google or some other platform. So
exactly, and then that's more and more true the more expensive your product is, because the more friction there is between initial touch and purchase, the more research they're doing, the more people they're asking, the more behind the scenes action is happening that you don't know. So like if you're still relying on like last click kind of attribution and you're selling like, a $5,000 a year kind of B2B solution, like your hands are tied behind your back. You don't actually know how people are finding out about you and deciding why they use you over a competitor.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of overall, and like you give me your take on this too, because it's an interesting direction that we even want to take our marketing, and I think that a lot of people should go about this. Is that maybe even just like having one strong suit where you kind of create your organic traffic, or you create your I guess kind of like a moat of people coming in and they know you from this platform. But at the same time, from even what we've seen is that there's a point of diminishing return of like you can only scale Google ads so much, or you can only scale
Yeah.
Facebook ads so much until
Mhm.
you kind of need to start like tweaking it with not just like the campaigns level of Facebook ads,
Mm.
but like the campaign level of different platforms, and like
Mm.
let's lower Facebook ads this time and like let's raise Reddit ads and so on.
Mm.
Do you see that as being something that's going to be happening in the future?
Yes, and it's already happening now. Like forever, Google has been criticized, I guess, as like Google Ads, I should say, criticized as like taking all the credit for every other marketing activity that you do because half your spend goes towards branded keywords, and it's people that already know they need a solution, they're already purchasing. Makes you think that the user journey is very short, even if you sell something high ticket. Um, and basically the Facebook algorithm has gotten so good that the same thing is happening. Like they know when you are in market, and then they put the ad in front of you and they take credit, and then they take more of your budget because they take credit. But the ultimate like long-term question is, how do you actually go and create new demand amongst your ICP? Like how do you force your marketing function to go beyond people who are already saying, hey, I need a CRM, and then everyone in your market is competing over that same click, right? But if you can create a moat of people who, like, you go one layer higher in the consideration funnel, being like, hey, I know that marketing managers who are 40 years old who like are working in CPG companies are potential customers. Can you build a relationship with them? Can you build surface area across search and AI overview slash LLMs for people, questions that those people might ask before they're actively looking for a solution to this problem? And then when they are, they already know me. They've seen me, they trust me. That's where I think the really exciting thing about Reddit lies. It's a very similar value prop to thought leadership on LinkedIn. You're not approaching people buying next week. You're approaching people who might be in market in the next few years, but you're getting them at a big discount if you do it right. You're building your long-term pipeline rather than just cashing in on short-term pipeline and being stuck in the paid media hamster wheel.
Right. So just to wrap it up, if you could kind of pitch your Reddit, if you could pitch the Reddit solution to a specific company, how would you say, hey, we're already doing Facebook, we're already doing Google. I'm not really sure that we need Reddit. What would you be your elevator pitch or your convincing pitch?
Well, yeah, I would say that Reddit is probably the prime complement to, let's call it like the meta, the paid search and social sort of pillars that most brands have now. Mostly because you want to drive discoverability amongst other people that the algorithm doesn't know are valuable, which is a huge secondary problem. And you also want to influence buying decision when people are going through the process of figuring out what their options are, vetting you against your competitors, and making sure that you're able to steer the conversation when they're looking. Because, I mean, do it yourself. Go to Google, look up like best CRM solution for whatever use case, and you're going to be confronted with a bunch of Reddit threads. Those Reddit threads are informing other people who are searching on ChatGPT for the same solutions. If you want to influence that part of the journey, if you need that trust in order to get that purchase in the end, Reddit goes really well alongside Google and particularly alongside Facebook. You won't be able to spend as much on Reddit ads as you will on Meta, but you'll be able to do something different, which is steer the conversation in your niche in the direction that suits you in the long term.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Colin, thanks so much for jumping on the live today. And is there any place that that people can find you and Karmatic?
Yes, you can go to withkarmic.com. That's WITHKARMIC.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I'm writing a lot about what we're learning and figuring out about Reddit because it is still a bit of a new space. So if you're interested, but you're not in the position to go and buy it, just follow me and start chatting with me, and I'm very happy to answer questions if people have them.
Perfect. Well, this is the CEO or the co-founder of Karmic, Colin James Belay, and thanks so much again for jumping on.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
Cheers. Take care.
All right. Bye.